Robber baron is a term first applied by 19th century muckrakers, and these muckrakers were seeking to expose corruption and wrongdoing in established institutions. It stated that at this time that all of this revolutionizing efforts was branded with the motive of private gain on the part of the new captains of the industry to organize and exploit the resources of a nation upon a gigantic scale, to regiment its farmers and workers into harmonious corps of producers, and to do this only in the name of an uncontrolled appetite for private profit. Here surely is the great inherent contradiction whence so much disaster, outrage, and misery has flowed. Robber barons, standing for a gilded age of corruption, monopoly, and rampant individualism. Their corporations were the octopus devouring all in its path. This metaphor appeared as early as February 9th, 1859, when the New York Times used it to characterize the business practices of Cornelius Vanderbilt. Now, the real question is, how did these individuals gain so much wealth, power, and control in a time that is stated that there was so much poverty and even later a Great Depression? People such as Vanderbilt developed a reputation as a plunderer who took no prisoners. And also at that time, business leaders in the United States from about 1865 to 1900 were, on the whole, a set of avaricious rascals who habitually cheated and robbed investors and consumers, corrupted government, fought ruthlessly among themselves, and in general carried on predatory activities. Once again, there is nothing new under the sun.
Your problem is that you're trying to understand this as an economic story. Once you look at it as a crime story, you'll get it. And from that point forward, I started to understand the whole mechanism, the subprime mortgage scam. It really was a scam. It's really just a massive corporatized version of like selling oregano as weed, basically. They took stuff that these incredibly worthless, highly risky mortgage loans, right? They would give out loans to everybody with a pulse. Whether you had a job or not, whether you were a citizen or not, didn't matter. Important thing was to get the loan, immediately sell it off, chop it up, turn it into securities, and then they used this highly advanced sort of mathematical trick to turn all that sort of mortgage hamburger into AAA rated securities. So you'd have like a junk rated mortgage, like the riskiest loan in existence, something that was so toxic that companies like Countrywide wouldn't want to hold on to it for more than a week because they were afraid the stuff would blow up. And then they would sell it off to like a pension fund or, an insurance company in the form of a AAA rated security, which, is as safe as a US Treasury bond. So it was a scam.
My fellow Americans, tonight I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak that started in China and is now spreading throughout the world. Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic. This is the most aggressive and comprehensive effort to confront a foreign virus in modern history. We are marshaling the full power of the federal government and the private sector to protect the American people. Now, I'm going to sign this, and it's a great honor. $6.2 trillion. I've never signed anything with a T on it. I don't know if I can handle this one, Mitch. We can't chicken out at this point, can we? I don't think so, huh? All right, thank you all. Good, I wanted that to be a nice signature.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before. And this crisis provides the opportunity for us, as I would say, the opportunity to do things that you could not do before. The good news, I suppose, if you want to see a silver lining, is the problems are big enough that they lend themselves to ideas from both parties for the solution.
We as a people are not afraid, and we are waking up to the robber barons and the big banksters who are looting this economy with the Federal Reserve.
Well,
the Rothschilds family did start the Federal, they divided Europe first, took over Europe, Napoleon.
That's exaggeration.
Well, no comment on that, sir?
Do I have your attention? I hope so. Since the formation of this country, we have been under a state of panic. And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight on who and exactly what are causing these panics. And once you dig in a little bit deeper, you realize that these seem to be orchestrated and not organic. These kings of chaos have used the Hegelian dialectic to their advantage, and at this point have it down to a science. It's the same pattern over and over again. And once we start recognizing these patterns, you can see right through the facade. They create the problem, cause the people to panic, and then when they do, they offer their solution. But I just wanted to reel everyone in right now and get our heads on straight and think critically, not emotionally, because that's what these people try to do. They take advantage of your emotions and your immediate reaction to those emotions. But God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. What is a sound mind? It's to keep your composure even under pressure, even in the midst of a panic, because they know that people will make foolish decisions when they're in a state of fear or panic. These barons of the past and now present have exploited this very thing. They have changed the way that we work. Because before the Industrial Revolution, people still had land, were farming, and it was a slower pace of life. But what have they done? They've sped up our lives and turned us all into wage slaves. And why is that? It's because when you're in a panic and all you can think about is providing for you and your own, you can't think about anything else. And that's the point. Why do you think that all of these barons, whether it be Carnegie, Rockefeller, or Vanderbilt, all of these people have invested a lot of money in education. And what they've done is they've re-educated the past out of us. A very important truth to hide the historical fact that Jesus returned in the generation that he said he would. That's the reason for the chaos. To hide that one truth so that everything that people ever believed in this season was a complete lie. And what I'm trying to do here is to break through those lies with a truth that is so overwhelming that it cannot be denied. And with all that being said, let's dig into some details. A lot of people may not know what a robber baron is, and myself included, until I did this study. And as you heard in my intro, you can see here that a robber baron was first applied by 19th century muckrakers. And a muckraker was basically a reformed journalist. And notice it says that these robber barons were wealthy, powerful, and unethical. It's interesting that they admit that now, but I think that we're further along now in the timeline where, 1870, that was over 150 years ago or something like that. Apparently, they're just admitting it now that we're further along. But the same goes for today, because a lot of these guys have similar business practices, and that stuff gets swept under the rug today because it's in our immediate present. The metaphor appeared as early as February 9th, 1859, when the New York Times used it to characterize the business practices of Cornelius Vanderbilt. Historian T.J. Stiles says the metaphor conjures up visions of titanic monopolists who crushed competitors, rigged markets, and corrupted government. In their greed and power, legend has it, they held sway over a helpless democracy. So before we move on, I just wanted to say I read some of this book, and I'm referencing some of it as well. And if you guys want to read this, it's a pretty good read so far. It's The Robber Barons, The Great American Capitalist by Matthew Josephson. And there was another book that I listened to on audio, and it was this one, The Robber Barons by Andrew Green. And it has a lot of good info about these guys, and he paints them in such a flowery picture that it almost makes you want to puke. So just a heads up. There were several prominent figures, Carnegie being one of them. And get this, it says that he became a leading philanthropist in the United States, Great Britain, and the British Empire. And during the last 18 years of his life, he gave away around $350 million, equivalent to $6.9 billion in 2025 dollars. And 90% of that money that he gave away, it stated that it was to charities, foundations, and universities. And he even had a book, which they call an article, called The Gospel of Wealth. I'll read just the first paragraph or so. And it states, the problem of our age is the proper administration of wealth so that the ties of brotherhood may still bind together the rich and poor in harmonious relationship. The conditions of human life have not only been changed, but revolutionized within the past few hundred years. You don't say. In former days, there was little difference between the dwelling, dress, food, and environment of the chief and those of his retainers. The Indians are today where civilized man then was. When visiting I don't know how to pronounce that, I was led to the wigmen of the chief. It was just like others in external appearance, and even within the difference was trifling between it and those of the poorest of his braves. The contrast between the palace of the millionaire and the cottage of the laborer with us today measures the change which has come with civilization. So that's about as much as I can take of his slop. So back to this. Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, Scotland. He immigrated to what is now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, United States, with his parents in 1848 at the age of 12. Carnegie started work in a cotton mill and later as a telegrapher. By the 1860s, he had investments in railroads, railroad sleeping cars, bridges, and oil derricks. He accumulated further wealth as a bond salesman, raising money for the American enterprise in Europe. He built Pittsburgh's Carnegie Steel Company, which he sold to J.P. Morgan, this guy, in 1901 for $303,450,000. It formed the basis of the U.S. Steel Corporation. And at that point, that's when there was a big merger at that time when J.P. Morgan bought this, and this is according to that book that I was listening to as well. After selling Carnegie Steel, so that's what it was Carnegie Steel, but then once it was merged to JP Morgan, it was changed to the United States Steel Corporation. So check this out. After selling Carnegie Steel, he surpassed John D. Rockefeller as the richest American of the time. I didn't know that either. So that's an interesting thing. And then just like all of these other guys, it states Carnegie devoted the remainder of his life to large-scale philanthropy with special emphasis on building local libraries, working for world peace, education, that's important, and scientific research, that's also important. He funded Carnegie Hall in New York City, the Peace Palace in The Hague, founded the Carnegie Corporation of New York, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Carnegie Institution for Science, Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland, Carnegie Hero Fund, Carnegie Mellon University, and the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, among others. So that's not even all of them. So we'll talk about JP just a little bit as well. And it's stated that he was an American financier and investment banker who dominated corporate finance on Wall Street throughout the Gilded Age and Progressive Era as the head of the banking firm that ultimately became known as J.P. Morgan Chase and Company, which a lot of people are still in debt to them today, myself included. He was a driving force behind the wave of industrial consolidations in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Over the course of his career on Wall Street, Morgan superheaded the formation of several prominent multinational corporations, including U.S. Steel, like we mentioned, because he bought that from Carnegie, and then they had a big merger, International Harvester Company, and get this, General Electric. He and his partners also held controlling interests in numerous other American businesses, including Aetna Incorporated, Western Union, the Pullman Car Company, and 21 railroads. Not only was Carnegie involved in the railroads, JP Morgan was, and even John D. Rockefeller, which I didn't know he was involved in that as well, but apparently they had their hands dipping in multiple jars, if you will. And it stated that his grandfather, Joseph Morgan, was one of the co-founders of Aetna. Through his holdings, Morgan exercised enormous influence over capital markets in the United States. During the Panic of 1907, it's stated that this Panic of 1907 was actually a catalyst for them creating the Federal Reserve, which is still enslaving us today. They're inflating the currency so much. And in doing that, they're stealing our labor from us. And all the while, another thing that I've noticed too is that the stock market, in my opinion, is a total scam. They've been doing insider trading since the inception of it, basically. But back to Morgan, it says that during the Panic of 1907, he organized a coalition of financiers that saved the American monetary system from collapse. Well, you look at that. He's a savior. As a Progressive era's leading banker, Morgan's dedication to efficiency and modernization helped transform the shape of the American economy. Like I said, they changed the way that we work now because of all of this. Adrian Woolridge characterized Morgan as America's greatest banker. Morgan died in Rome, Italy, in his sleep in 1913 at the age of 75, leaving his fortune and business to his son, J.P. Morgan Jr. Biographer Ron Chernow estimated his fortune at $80 million when he died, which is the equivalent of $1.9 billion. And the next baron is John Davidson Rockefeller Sr., or John D. Rockefeller. And he was an American businessman and philanthropist. One thing that I've realized too in this study is that even philanthropy is a total scam, because it's a facade in making these big wigs looking like they're really generous and all of that. All the while they're still capitalizing on your ignorance. So it stated he was one of the wealthiest Americans of all time and one of the richest persons in modern history. Rockefeller was born into a large family in upstate New York, and all of these people were in New York. So there's something special to these people, or at least special at that time of the New York area, because it seems like that was the control center of the operation or something. So his family moved several times before eventually settling in Cleveland, Ohio. He became an assistant bookkeeper at age 16 and went into several business partnerships beginning at age 20, concentrating his business on oil refining. Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870. He ran it until 1897 and remained its largest shareholder. In his retirement, he focused his energy and wealth on philanthropy. See that? These guys care about us. They get all this money. They make everyone homeless and poor, but then they just want to give back because they're just good people, right? Especially regarding education, medicine, higher education, that's important, and modernizing the southern United States. What does that even mean? They're modernizing it? This is another thing that you may not have known either, because not only was Rockefeller highly invested in the oil business, but he was also a big holder in the kerosene as well. So the natural gas. Rockefeller's wealth grew substantially as kerosene and gasoline became increasingly important commodities, eventually making him the richest person in the United States. Wow. And look at this. By 1900, Standard Oil controlled about 90% of the nation's oil production. The company lowered production costs and expanded oil distribution through corporate and technological innovations, but it also benefited from a legal environment that enabled consolidation. So that's what they kept doing. That's how they kept gaining these monopolies, because they had control, they had capital. And that was another thing, is capitalism only works for the people who have capital, which these guys had it. Now back to Rockefeller. Critics argue that regulatory capture played a role in facilitating its monopoly power, a view reinforced by Rockefeller's reputed mark, competition is a sin. Interesting. So these guys basically had a survival of the fittest and a Darwinistic worldview, including Charles Loring Brace from my last video. And a lot of these guys, if you read into their biographies and stuff, they even are stated to have been Protestant or something like that. But yet, you look at the fruit of their lives, and really all they cared about and all they wanted to serve was mammon. So Rockefeller's company and business practices came under criticism, particularly in the writings of author Ida Tarbell. And she was actually one of, I believe, what they would call a muckraker at that time. The Supreme Court ruled in 1911 that Standard Oil must be dismantled for violation of federal antitrust laws. When it was broken up into 34 separate entities, which included companies that became Exxon Oil, Exxon Mobil, Chevron Corporation, and others, some of which remain among the largest companies by revenue worldwide. Consequently, Rockefeller became the country's first billionaire, with a fortune worth nearly 2% of the national economy. His personal wealth was estimated in 1913 at $900 million, which was almost 3% of the gross domestic product of $39.1 billion that year. Rockefeller spent much of the last 40 years of his life in retirement at Kuwait, his estate in Winchester County, New York, defining the structure of modern philanthropy along with other key industrialists such as Andrew Carnegie. His fortune was used chiefly to create the modern systematic approach of targeted philanthropy through the creation of foundations that supported medicine, education, and scientific research. So you notice they're all getting involved in education and scientific research even. His foundations pioneered developments in medical research and were instrumental in the near eradication of hookworm in American South and yellow fever in the United States. You guys believe that? Yeah, right. He and Carnegie gave form and impetus through their charities to the work of Abraham Flexner, this guy, who in his essay, Medical Education in America, emphatically endowed empiricism as the basis for the U.S. medical system of the 20th century. Rockefeller was the founder of the University of Chicago and Rockefeller University and funded the establishment of Central Philippine University in the Philippines. He was a devout mainline Baptist Christian. See that? He was a Christian and supported many church-based institutions. I'm sure he did. I wonder if he was, I don't know, maybe involved with Westcott and Hort or C.I. Schofield, maybe. Who knows? Maybe they're influencing those as well. Not maybe. He adhered to total abstinence from alcohol and tobacco throughout his life. For advice, he relied closely on his wife, Laura Spelman Rockefeller. They had 4 daughters and a son together. He was a faithful congregant of the Erie Street Baptist Mission Church. Isn't that sweet? He taught Sunday school too. Oh. And served as a trustee clerk and occasional janitor. Religion was a guiding force throughout his life, and he believed it to be the source of his success. What religion? I think you know. His father, the devil, was the cause of and source of his success. Rockefeller was also considered a supporter of capitalism based on a perspective of social Darwinism. And there again, these guys are Darwinists. And he was quoted often as saying, "The growth of a large business is merely a survival of the fittest." Yeah. I'm going to cruise back to capitalism again because I forgot about this and it reminded me after, because we're talking about Darwinist stuff, but a lot of these guys were all contemporary to one another and I didn't even realize that. So I'm thinking a lot of you haven't either, but Karl Marx and Charles Darwin were contemporaries to one another, along with all of these barons. So I wanted to point this out because Karl Marx, look at that picture, was also for capitalism. The initial use of the term capitalism in its modern sense is attributed to Louis Blanc in 1850. What I call capitalism, that is to say, the appropriation of capital by some to the exclusion of others. Isn't that interesting? the appropriation of capital by some to the exclusion of others. But we live in a free market and everything is on the up and ups, right? And Pierre Joseph Proudhon in 1861, economic and social regime in which capital, the source of income, does not generally belong to those who make it work through their labor. So realize that the source of income does not belong to those who make it through their labor. Capitalism does not work for the working people. Isn't that what it's saying? Write it down in the comments if that's not right. Karl Marx frequently referred to the capital and to the capitalist mode of production in Das Kapital, and that is a critique of political economy, also known as Das Kapital, is a foundational theoretical text in Marxist philosophy, economics, and politics by Karl Marx. Marx did not use the form capitalism, but instead used capital. And look at that. Capital is a central concept in Marxian critique of political economy and in Marxian thought more generally. Capitalist and capitalist mode of production, which appear frequently. Due to the word being coined by socialist critics of capitalism, economist and historian Robert Hessen stated that the term capitalism itself is a term of disparagement and a misnomer for economic individualism. Bernard Harcourt agrees with the statement that the term is a misnomer, adding that it is misleadingly suggests that there is such a thing as capital that inherently functions in certain ways and is governed by stable economic laws of its own. So we'll just move on to Cornelius Vanderbilt, and it stated that he was an American business magnate who built his wealth in railroads and shipping. After working with his father's business, he worked his way into leadership positions in inland and coastal shipping, then invested in the rapidly growing railroad industry, effectively transforming the geography of the United States. As one of the richest Americans in history and wealthiest figures overall, Vanderbilt was the patriarch of the wealthy and influential Vanderbilt family. He provided the initial gift to found Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, which I think at the time was around $1 million, according to that book that I listened to. For his monopoly on shipping and the railroads facilitated by political manipulation, Vanderbilt is often described as a robber baron. So Vanderbilt started off as a steamboat entrepreneur, and it stated that after Thomas Gibbons died in 1826, Vanderbilt worked for Gibbons' son, William, until 1829. Though he had always run his own business on the side, he now worked entirely for himself. Step by step, he started lines between New York and the surrounding region. First, he took over Gibbons Ferry to New Jersey, then switched to Western Long Island Sound. In 1831, he took over his brother Jacob's line to Peeks Hill, New York, on the lower Hudson River. That year, he faced opposition by a steamboat operated by Daniel Drew, who forced Vanderbilt to buy him out. Impressed, Vanderbilt became a secret partner with Drew for the next 30 years so that the two men would have an incentive to avoid competing with each other. In 1834, Vanderbilt competed on the Hudson River against the Hudson River Steamboat Association, a steamboat monopoly between New York City and Albany. Using the name The People's Line, he used the populist language associated with Democratic President Andrew Jackson. to get popular support for his business. At the end of the year, the monopoly paid him a large amount to stop competing, and he switched his operations to Long Island Sound. During the 1830s, textile mills were built in large numbers in New England as the United States developed its manufacturing base. Some of the first railroads in the United States were built from Boston to Long Island Sound to connect with steamboats that ran to New York. By the end of the decade, Vanderbilt dominated the steamboat business on the South and began to take over management of the connecting railroads. So that's when he started getting into the railroad systems. In the 1840s, he launched a campaign to take over the most attractive of these lines, the New York, Providence, and Boston Railroad, popularly known as the Stonington. By cutting fares on competing lines, Vanderbilt drove down the Stonington stock price and took over the presidency of the company in 1847. It was the first of the many railroads he would head. During these years, Vanderbilt also operated many other businesses. He bought large amounts of real estate in Manhattan and Staten Island and took over the Staten Island Ferry in 1838. It was in the 1830s when he was first referred to as the Commodore, then the highest rank in the United States Navy, a common nickname for important steamboat entrepreneurs. By the end of the 1840s, it was applied only to Vanderbilt. And it's also interesting because he played a big part in the Civil War as well. And I'll just read this little segment. And it stated, when the Civil War began in 1861, Vanderbilt attempted to donate his largest steamship, the Vanderbilt, to the Union Navy. Secretary of the Navy, Gideon Welles, refused it, thinking its operation and maintenance too expensive for what he expected to be a short war. Vanderbilt had little choice but to lease it to the War Department at prices set by shipbrokers. When the Confederate ironclad Virginia, popularly known in the North as the Merrimac, wrought havoc with the Union blockading squadron at Hampton Roads, Virginia, Secretary of War Eden Stanton and President Abraham Lincoln called on Vanderbilt for help. This time he succeeded in donating the Vanderbilt to the Union Navy, equipping it with a ram and staffing it with hand-picked officers. It helped bottle up the Virginia, after which Vanderbilt converted it into a cruiser to hunt for the Confederate commerce raider Alabama. So that's interesting as well. And this is Cornelius Vanderbilt Medal. In 2022, the medal was donated to Vanderbilt University by Cornelius Vanderbilt's great-great-grandson, William H. Vanderbilt. That is an interesting picture. Now, to close off, I wanted to circle back on the railroad systems, and that should lead into the next video about the orphan trains as well. But this is just a list of robber barons, and you can see that, so it doesn't even state here about Andrew Carnegie, but he was also involved in the railroads. Charles Crocker, he was an American railroad executive. Henry Morrison Flagler was also involved in railroads. Jay Gould, Edward Henry Harriman, James Hill, also involved in railroads. Collis Potter Huntington, J.P. Morgan, John D., Russell Sage, Leland Stanford, Cornelius Vanderbilt, of course, Charles Tyson Yerkes, just to name a few. Another thing that I wanted to add before we closed out is a baron is actually a rank of nobility or title of honor. I didn't know that. It's a title, and we can't leave these guys out. The Baron Rothschilds. The first baron is stated to be Nathan Mayer Rothschild, and he was a British banker and politician from the wealthy international Rothschild family. He was also a hereditary baron of the Austrian Empire. So these guys make their rounds, right? And then if you're curious, the second baron, Lionel Walter Rothschild, second Baron Rothschild, and he was a British banker, politician, zoologist, and soldier who was a member of the Rothschild family. As a Zionist leader, he was presented with the Balfour Declaration, which he pledged British support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. Now that's for another video, but I hope to cover the Balfour Declaration at some point. The third Rothschild is Nathan Mayer Rothschild, and he was a British scientist, intelligence officer during World War II, CIA maybe, and later a senior executive with Royal Dutch Shell and N.M. Rothschild and Sons, and an advisor to the Edward Heath and Margaret Thatcher. And of course, the man who made the intro, Nathaniel Charles Jacob Rothschild, 4th Baron Rothschild, was a British hereditary peer, investment banker, and member of the Rothschild banking family. This guy is the most recent baron, and it stated that he's a Canadian financier and hereditary peer who is a member of the Rothschild banking family of England. So you don't hear a lot about this guy. So apparently the 5th Baron has a son, which would be the 6th, whose name and age the couple have not publicly revealed. Isn't that interesting? There's a 5th Baron that no one knows about from this guy. So he's 54. He's 54 years old. So he has a son, let's say, in his 30s. Is that fair to say? So that's just a little fun fact, if you will, about the barons and the Rothschilds and their connection to Zionism and the Balfour Declaration. So we will conclude here just touching on the railroad system because it's going to tie into the next video. And if you guys hadn't seen the first video called The Man You Know Nothing About, and the orphan train movement started in 1854 and it ran all the way to 1929, which is 75 years, which a lot of people don't realize that it was actually that long. So we'll just touch a little bit on what's said to be the railroad empire of Cornelius Vanderbilt. And I kind of wanted to focus in on him, even though a lot of these other guys were involved as well. He was most renowned for all of this. And it is unfathomable for me to believe that he did not know what was on his cargo ships. He was a player and dare I say a main player in the shipping of the children from New York all the way to the West for what they say was to repopulate the West, which why was the West not populated? Another question that's not answered. But he got paid handsomely in order to participate in this social experiment, which we call the orphan train movement. So basically right on time in the 1850s, like I said, it started in 1854. Though Vanderbilt had relinquished his presidency of the Stonington Railroad during the California Gold Rush, he took an interest in several railroads during the 1850s, serving on the boards of directors of the Erie Railway, the Central Railroad of New Jersey, the Hartford and New Haven, and the New York and Harlem, popularly known as the Harlem. In 1863, Vanderbilt took control of the Harlem in a famous stock market corner. There again, the stock market scam. And was elected its president. He later explained he wanted to show that he would take this railroad, which was generally considered worthless, and make it valuable. It had a key advantage. It was only steam railroad to enter the center of Manhattan, running down 4th Avenue, later Park Avenue, to a station on 26th Street, where it connected with a horse-drawn streetcar line. Vanderbilt brought his eldest son, Billy, in as vice president of the Harlem. Billy had had a nervous breakdown early in life, and his father had sent him to a farm on Staten Island. But he proved himself a good businessman and eventually became the head of the Staten Island Railway. Though the Commodore had once scorned Billy, he was impressed by his son's success. Eventually, he promoted him to operational manager of all his railroad lines. In 1864, the Commodore sold his last ships in order to concentrate on the railroads. Once in charge of Harlem, Vanderbilt encountered conflicts with connecting lines. In each case, the strife ended in a battle that Vanderbilt won. He bought control of the Hudson River Railroad in 1864, the New York Central Railroad in 1867, and the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Railway in 1869. He later bought the Canada Southern as well. In 1870, he consolidated two of his key lines into the New York Central and Hudson River Railroad, one of the first giant corporations in United States history. In 1869, Vanderbilt directed the Harlem to begin construction of the Grand Central Depot on 42nd Street in Manhattan. It was finished in 1871 and served as his line's terminus in New York. He sank the tracks on 4th Avenue in a cut that later became a tunnel. There was also a dispute with Vanderbilt and some other guys, and it's saying Jay Gould and James Fisk. And there was a quote in there that I wanted to share from the book that I was reading. And it is a famous quote from Vanderbilt, and it's right here, and it states, "Gentlemen, you have undertaken to cheat me. I will not sue you, for the law takes too long. I will ruin you. Sincerely yours, Cornelius Vanderbilt." We have found out that these men have been molding our societies. And even in today's day and age, you got the modern day barons, whether it be Donald Trump, Bill Gates, or an Elon Musk. Just as they did in the past, so are they doing today, manipulating stock prices, causing all these panics. Just like in the Great Depression, it was stated that there was a big crash in the stock market. Why is it that the stock market has so much power? How does it have this magical power that just is able to influence our way of life? Because would these people, including us, naturally panic over these certain circumstances, or is that panic actually magnified through propaganda in order to steer us in the proper direction that we need to go, which is away from God, away from the truth, and into a bunch of lies? And if you're a first-time listener, I would invite you to take this continued journey along this road with me and learn our true history, who we are, where we are, and when we are. And with all that being said, I will see you in the next video, and God bless.